and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is the adoption of the agenda.
I do have one brief change. There will be an additional executive session at the end of the meeting for attorney client.
I move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? 6-0.
Correct. As you might recall, when the board's ability to continue to be open to the public was altered because of the stay-at-home order, and prior to that, even or less, the board suspended board policy BCBI, and at this time, since we're able to have the public be present again, we are asking that the board reinstate policy BCBI.
I move to reinstate board policy BCBI, public participation at board meetings.
Second. Moved and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. Any public comment? Presentations of the year?
Again, this is one of the probably presentations that would have come earlier in our year had we not been dealing with COVID-19. But it is always my great pleasure to introduce to you the nominees for our district for Kansas Teacher of the Year. In our district currently, we nominate teachers based on principal nominations, and they make those nominations with a great deal of consideration as to the work that teachers do, not only in their classrooms, that is an important aspect, but also the work that they do outside of their classrooms to help their profession and aid in their profession. And tonight we have two, and Debbie Watson is here to talk to you about the K-12 program, which she will do in just a moment. But only one of them could be present this evening. So I'm going to start with Brian Rickard. Brian Rickard is the teacher at Newton High School that does our engineering classes in our career technology and education pathway. He is an outstanding educator. He has been nominated and worked at a statewide and national level for Project Lead the Way. And we're very fortunate to have Brian as one of our teachers here in the district. He was sorry that he could not be here tonight, but his other role as dad is very important to him, and his daughter had a ball game this evening. And every Monday for the next several weeks, so he will not be able to attend a Monday night board meeting. So we're very proud of the work of Brian and proud of his nomination. We will make sure that he gets his certificate. In addition, we have Johanna Hine. Johanna has been just instrumental in our district for a number of years. She took a little bit of time and stayed at home for a little bit of time and then came back or transferred from one school to another. I'm confused. I've got you confused with, yes. Another teacher who's also outstanding in the classroom. Yes. So we are excited to have Johanna here tonight and Debbie Watson to talk a little bit about Johanna's contributions and the K-12 program.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share about this outstanding program and the opportunity that it provides for our educators. So just a little history about the program, that National Teacher of the Year program began in 1952 as a project by the Council of State School Officers, which in our state would be our state education commissioner. There's not really clearly defined criteria. However, there are certain expectations of the candidates, those being the ability to inspire children from all backgrounds and abilities, to have the respect of their colleagues, students, and parents, to be active in their community, and the ability to carry out the responsibilities of the position. Our current 2020 Kansas Teacher of the Year is a preschool teacher who teaches in a program nestled within a retirement village that includes interaction with residents. Her name is Tabitha Rossbroy. She has helped the program to build new social capital in the community while also boasting the highest preschool literacy and math scores in the district. Tabitha is from Winfield, Kansas. Recently, Tabitha was also named the National Teacher of the Year, and she is the first preschool teacher ever to receive that honor. So, yay for Kansas. Now, the Kansas Teacher of the Year program was started in Kansas in 1992 by Mr. Dale Dennis, who is the current Deputy Commissioner of Education for the Division of Fiscal and Administrative Services. Mr. Dennis oversees several teams, including the Communications and Recognitions programs, and this encompasses 12 recognition programs, including the Kansas Teacher of the Year program. Dale Dennis has been serving Kansas for 52 years as a Deputy Commissioner, and he became the school finance administrator in 1967 and also served as a teacher and a principal. And if you ever attend the Kansas Teacher of the Year banquet, Dennis will tell you that it is his favorite night of the year, and he's there every year in his tuxedo with his red bow tie. Now, in searching the list of state-level finalists over the last 29 years, I discovered that our state-level finalists, our only state-level finalist from Newton was in 2018, and that was our own Megan Nagel. I don't know how many regional nominees we've had over those years, but know that in my tenure, which has been 4 years in Newton, we've had 4 elementary nominees: Sharon Skidmore in 2017, Megan in 2018, Debbie Miller-Daly in 2019, and now Johanna Hine is our 2021 elementary nominee. For purposes of the K-12 program, there are 4 districts in the state of Kansas. Every district of Kansas can and should nominate both an elementary and a secondary candidate every single year. But as a state, we fall woefully short of that goal. I think it's somewhere in the 20th percentile of how many districts actually participate. The purpose of the K-12 program is to provide the educational community a platform for voices to be heard, to allow us to advocate for and to sing the praises of education in the state of Kansas. It is also an opportunity for professional growth. As a nominee for K-12, candidates will serve on a team of their peers. If Johanna is a state finalist, she will serve on a team with 2 finalists, an elementary and secondary teacher from each of the 4 districts in the state of Kansas. If she remains a nominee at the district level, she will still get to serve on a team of about 5 or 6 of her elementary peers. She'll spend a day of professional development in each of their districts. She will also host the team in Newton during the spring semester of 2021. Additionally, each nominee will be involved in a professional development opportunity the day of the state banquet in Wichita, Kansas in November of 2020, also one of my favorite days of the year. She will also have the opportunity to attend the Keene Leadership Conference in the winter of 2021, and then will then be a lifetime member of Keene, which is the Kansas Exemplary Educators Network. And my understanding is that this Keene Conference is one of the premier leadership conferences in the country. And now I'd like to introduce Johanna Hine, Newton's 2021 elementary K-12 nominee, by reading the nomination letter that I submitted. Members of the K-12 Selection Committee, it is my sincere honor to provide this letter of support for Mrs. Johanna Hine, the 2021 Newton Elementary K-12 nominee. I've had the pleasure of working with Johanna for the past 4 years in my capacity as principal at Sunset Elementary in Newton, Kansas. One of the many great blessings of my career has been the opportunity to work with Johanna. Johanna is an exceptional teacher who celebrates her students for all they are and can be, and does so through a trauma-responsive heart and lens. Johanna began her career as an interrelated teacher and then made the change to teaching in a core classroom when she accepted the position of second grade teacher at Sunset Elementary. Johanna was a very good classroom teacher. Although Johanna was a very good classroom teacher, I had no idea of what she was capable of until last year when she moved into special education. What I have witnessed is a very good classroom teacher but has proven to be an exceptional special education teacher. As educators, one of our favorite battle cries is that we will meet our students where they are at. If we could only live that every single day, as Johanna does. She is one of the best advocates for students that I know. The needs of the students on her caseload are deep and wide. She accepts and loves every student for exactly who they are and where they are at. She is passionately protective of her kids, and in a kind and insightful way, she helps other staff members to understand the whys of her kids and the hows of best practices in meeting their needs. Johanna's commitment to serve also extends to the many committees that she has and continues to work on, both at the building and at the district level. Currently, she's a member of our building leadership team, the district professional learning committee, our building general education intervention team, and is one of 2 resilience coaches at Sunset. She shines in all of these roles, but as a resilience coach, she's a supernova. 3 years ago, Sunset began the journey becoming a trauma-responsive school. Throughout this journey, Johanna has become a champion for the cause. She underwent training with Rebecca Lewis-Pankratz and is now a resilience coach for our school family. She has helped us to grow our own social-emotional curriculum and practices. She emulates our new school culture and how she lives in this place every day with everyone with whom she comes in contact. Johanna is a trainer, a collaborator, a resource, an advocate, a supporter, a kind heart, and a friend. She personifies our school and our school mission statement, "We love you, and there is nothing you can do about it." And our school mantra, "I am safe, I am loved, I have people." In how she talks to and talks about our students every single day, Johanna is a wise, strong, and loving voice for the students and educators of Kansas. Thank you.
Johanna, we're very proud of the work that you do. And the change that you made was from Walton. I'm going to make sure I get this right now. Walton to Sunset, regular ed from special ed, and then have now gone back into a special education classroom. So again, congratulations. It's a well-deserved honor to be receiving this recognition. And I wish you all the best as you go forth and represent our district well on the state level. So thank you for all your work.
Okay, the next item is the
I move to approve consent agenda items A through Q.
second. Moving in second. All those in favor? 7-0. New business, approval of 2020-21 candidates.
Excuse me. The principals met after the last board meeting to review the dress code policies, and we have a couple of those principals here. Brandon could not be here. Joey Minigat is here. Caleb Smith is here. Tyler Swally is here. And with them is Eli Reddington, who is a student voice as a part of that. So if you have questions related to that part of the handbooks, they can answer those. We also made a change in the temperatures based on our debriefing meeting and looking at information from the CDC. And so we have made those consistent across all of the buildings that the temperature that will be the point at which a student gets taken home or called to be taken home will be 100.4 degrees, as that is the temperature is recommended. So that is a change that also has been made since the last review that board has had of these documents.
I move to approve the 2021 elementary parent, Santa Fe 5-6 Center student, Chisholm Middle School student, and Chisholm Middle School staff handbooks as presented.
Second. Moved in second, is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
So the staff will need to have direction as to what you would want to have changed in order for them to be able to bring them back for your approval.
You have to say something.
I was gonna say, the principals were not here at the last meeting. They listened to what the board said at the last board meeting. They did meet together collaboratively, did come up with a consistent set of guidelines. So there are particular things that the board does not want. Otherwise, they're not gonna know what they need to change.
I think it leaves, it's a little too subjective. I think we need to have more structure to it, so it's actually enforceable. Because when you leave things very vague and open, then we open ourselves up to people claiming that we're discriminating against them. So when you have clear, defined rules, I hate to use the word rules, but guidelines for what is appropriate in our educational system. It takes the burden off of our administrators and our teachers when they're enforcing it. And I'm just not comfortable with how vague it is.
And I would just rather stay the way it is.
What did you say, Matt?
I'd rather it just stay the way it
It
is.
is.
Where we have different dress codes for different grade levels.
Yeah.
That what we discussed last time, that we wanted consistency between the grade levels.
So I appreciated there is consistency in the proposal, albeit consistent. I don't think it's very clear an expectation for students and parents. It's also not clear and defined when it comes to staff members who would be trying to enforce that. Currently, the Chisholm dress code has far more specifics, it's far more clear, and gives some guidelines. Granted, there will always be situations which will be individualized, and there should be room for that. Special cases, of course, will come up. Looking at this current proposal, it does seem very, very vague, with certain areas that have no guidelines to them whatsoever. I agree with Jen, because in this, for example, a specific in the recommendation is, my screen is jumping all over it, that's why it's taking me a little bit, excuse me. Students must wear something on the bottom, pants, sweatpants, short skirt, dress, or leggings. You basically have to wear something on your bottom half, and that's it. There's nothing more. I think that can be very subjective. If there is a student who is maybe called out for an inappropriate length of something, well, there was no guideline to go by. So if that student is called out, but this student's not, where do you gauge that? So it's not clear and fair expectations to students, parents, or staff members. And I feel like with something this big, that puts our staff members in a dangerous situation for sexual harassment, singling individuals out. So I think where we do need to have clarity and room for individual cases, there has to be some clear guidelines and expectations. Because if we have people, kids, and I can think of a number of outfits that violate this proposed dress code, we didn't tell them what we expected. So did they really break it? No. So in looking at our current handbooks, I still would like to see some more consistency throughout the district. Of all our current dress codes, Chisholm's is probably my favorite. If I had to pick one, it's pretty clear, it's pretty defined, but there's still room for individual changes if necessary. And in looking at a number of other districts around us, beyond us, I've not seen anything that looks even vaguely familiar to this.
And I guess in taking another look at this and looking at it again, what was the need for changing the current one, I guess?
And I think the building principals could speak to that.
Give me a stand over here. So I'm Caleb Smith. I haven't met most of you yet, but so I've kind of come into this in the final steps. But I met with our Stuco officers a couple weeks ago. Eli is the student body president. He wanted to meet with me about this. The history of it is most of this policy that's in the handbooks today, which is the same one I was going to propose in mine, came from the social or racial justice group at our high school. So they designed most of this policy. And a lot of their reasonings, the whys behind it, a lot of it is racial discrimination and body shaming that was happening when you're trying to enforce the current policy. And coming from a district that has a similar current policy, I totally understand that and can see how that's tough. You talked about discrimination or being able to enforce. It's very hard to enforce, even when you give set guidelines like hands to the side and length of the shoulder and those kinds of things. It's very hard to enforce because one, male administrators don't want to go up to a girl and check their shoulders. Two, we don't. Some people have really long arms. Some people have really short arms. Depending on your body type, it's harder to know what's appropriate and what's not, even if you have those clear guidelines. So I was very supportive when they came to me of the new draft. Another thing to take into consideration, they got feedback from administration, and then Stuco revised it with Eli's leadership, and then brought it to me, and then the administrators at all three buildings then made some more changes to it with some verbiage that we weren't comfortable with, and what you have now is kind of the final product. So I'm very comfortable with it. Another thing that's important to me is relationships with kids. And when you have 1,000 kids in your building, the only thing that some of these kids sometimes get with interaction is, hey man, I need you to take your hat off, or hey man, you got to go change clothes. And whether you like it or not, it's the only interaction you might get with that kid that month or that 9 weeks, or even maybe throughout high school. And so it's a bad interaction, rather than if he's wearing a hat that has a Yankees hat, I can give him a hard time for liking the Yankees or whatever, So and try to build those relationships rather than battle something that to me is not going to impact their ability to learn. And so I'm very supportive of the policy. I understand what you guys are saying as far as parents understanding the expectations. I think if you read a lot of the stuff coming out right now about with the race tension, there's a lot of educational articles that talk about how this is the first spot that we as high schools and middle schools can start addressing some of that racial discrimination. Because there is some things that are inherently discriminate in all these policies you guys are reading at other schools. And so these discussions are happening where I'm coming from, Valley Center, same type of discussions. So I would maybe caution you from going off of what everybody else is doing, just because everybody's having that same discussion right now about how we can better support our students and build those relationships with the dress code. So I personally am very supportive of it. Eli, I know you guys, I watched the last board meeting. I know student input was very important to you guys. This policy was basically developed by students to be enforced. And I know the high school administrative team is very supportive as well. So, and Everard's here if you have questions as far as the past history. So questions for me.
I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
First, when were the students brought in for this particular recommendation?
So my understanding was 2 years ago, the racial justice group took it upon themselves to start developing policy because they saw what they considered discrimination within the current one. And then they took that to current administration and was, like I said, given some things to think about and to edit. And then my understanding is this last school year, Stuco worked on it throughout the year. Is that right? You're right. Okay. And so then when I was hired, they brought that to me to see if I would support that cause.
And that kind of answered my second question is who in the past or who typically writes this policy that's recommended? Is it always the racial justice group? Because I know that is it district-wide or is it just at the high school?
There is a district-wide policy that we put in there, I believe. Dr. Ham, I think at the top. I don't know if the other schools copied that into their handbooks or not. I did for mine that you'll see next month. But that doesn't contradict it. It's just basically an overall statement. And then, yeah, every school has their own. I would say in the past, usually it's probably been, I don't know here, most places I've been, it's administrative. Getting student input is becoming more of a practice, which is a good practice. So I was impressed that the racial justice group had already put all that legwork in and that they were working hand in hand with their student council to try to make some change that they thought was important. So.
Yeah, and that was something that was very important last time I was up here talking about, where I stepped in and there was a miscommunication on that part. So this year we felt it was vital and critical that we do actually give them a voice. It wasn't the final say so, it was definitely some of the stakeholders, some of the feedback. Like Caleb said, it was administration as well. A lot of it was feedback from previous, and this was the final outcome. And Caleb, myself, Blake, Greg, and Brian were all on board with it.
You guys have any concerns about enforcement?
It goes back, once again, Mallory said it best, who were, if we do get in that situation, as long as we're on the same page and feel supported, ultimately, we all feel we're doing the right thing. Ultimately, we feel like this is what the task, we were tasked with this last year and the year before that. So it's kind of a final outcome, a product. I feel like it is definitely not so much of change, but definitely true stakeholders, true feedback, a final product with everybody's values and what they believe in, and it's not solely dominated by one subgroup or administrative or top heavy. So I think we have some good experience working with students. We have experience and expertise and interactions with students as well. In those situations, I feel very confident. Caleb, Greg, Meg, we all feel we're good.
I would say from an enforcement standpoint, I think it's easier because, like I said before, when you have those black and white rules, it's hard with the different body types, the different arm lengths, the different going off of. I'm not going to put a ruler on our girls' shoulders that wear, straps, or boys. Some boys do wear it as well. And at the end of the day, I want them to be comfortable at school. I want them to want to be at school, and giving them a little bit of freedom is important. A lot of the old mindset is that you need to dress professionally because when you get out of high school, you're going to dress professionally. Well, I don't really buy that because every profession dresses different. Some people wear shorts and a t-shirt for their profession. Some people wear overalls. Some people, it's just all different. I want kids to be comfortable. I want them to want to come to school. I want to avoid power struggles that come from dress code enforcement. That's going to help with our discipline if we're not having power struggles with dress code. A simple thing like letting a kid wear a hat, which for some kids is a security blanket. I had a kid that at Valley that loved to wear his hoodie just right up to here over his ears because he was embarrassed of his ears, and he was fine as long as he could keep it right over his ears. As soon as we made him take it off, he was very uncomfortable and didn't want to be in school. So if we can avoid power struggles that aren't necessary, I think it's important to do so and just make it give them a little bit more freedom, and then hopefully that'll help some with their ability to want to be there. So.
For me, at the high school level, looking at the numbers, I think the chronic absenteeism rate's pretty high. It was about 26%. Out of every 100 kids, there's about 26 kids that are chronically absent. And I kind of told Caleb this. I go, I guarantee you that some of these kids are going to wake up and just want to come to school to show off their new hat. And if we can at least get them to come to school, that's even better. Giving them that feeling of wanting to come to school and being able to express themselves. And I feel like if it is inappropriate, that's an opportunity for us to have those conversations. As of right now, that happens already. And it's not us looking for violators. That's more of a consensus that we usually get an email from a teacher. They'll check and balance. One teacher will check in with another teacher, and then it'll get reported to us. It's not even a referral. It'll be a simple phone call. It'll be a counselor. It'll just be another interaction.
And I would say the whole front dress code feels pretty punitive. This is much less punitive. It's more of a collaborative dress code. We outline very clearly the values and the goals of the dress code. So even if we're not necessarily specifying 2 inches or the length of the shirt or the shorts, because we outline very clearly the reasons for having the dress code as it's written, we have very clearly, you must have a shirt, you must have pants. I think this is a much better approach to our dress code than the punitive style that we had in the previous dress code policy. And that worked really well at the time, but times have changed, and I think we have to change with that. And for Chisholm, we did also get student input with the principal's advisory group this year. So
Were staff members consulted?
yes, we discussed this in the building leadership team as well. So we had staff input as well.
I just struggle because I feel like I've spent the last year or more hearing from teachers talking about struggling to enforce things, not just dress code, behavior problems, things like that. And now we want to make a dress code that's essentially not enforceable or very subjective. And so teachers may be concerned that if they call something out, that they're going to immediately be, somebody's going to claim they're discriminating.
So I will say this, last time we heard you, we heard everybody, we took everybody's input. If it is not approved and it hasn't been approved, one of the things that we would ask is for, specificity. What is it, and some examples and non-examples.
Well,
Because at the end of the day, if you want students to not wear hats, then we can tell whether they have it on or off. And I know you're not talking about that, but if it's about the 1 inch, the 2 inch, what exactly is it very subjective now?
so when the statement in here says the shirt that covers stomach and chest, well, that's pretty vague. How much of your chest can you show? And who determines what's appropriate? And as men, I think that would be a really fine line for you to walk to determine if it's too much chest to show. And for females of all different sizes, it's very different on how we cover ourselves. So I just find it just very difficult
I guess
for
what's
all
in
of you to put yourselves in that situation.
What's in the current policy that would define that better about chest and stomach?
I'm not referring back to the current policy.
Well, I'm just saying, because the current policy wouldn't have any more, it'd be just as subjective as it is currently. I think the main thing is that you're covering your private parts. You have your underwear covered.
Which does that, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and so enforcement is difficult. If you've been an administrator, you can understand this. Enforcement is difficult regardless of the policy, because all policies are very objective, and we don't live in an objective school. So it's very hard to a lot of times enforce policies. One thing that's going to be very important to me with all discipline is that we're all on the same page and we're consistent and we're doing things and treating kids with equity. And so whether that's your dress code or any other discipline, I think that's important. But as far as the ability to enforce, from my experience, this will be easier to enforce because there's less of these measurement sticks in there of how to determine what's appropriate and what's not. And we can kind of use this as a guide. And at the end of the day, and this is what I've told them, we're not going to create problems that aren't problems. If it's not causing a problem to the learning environment, then we're not going to just enforce a policy just to have power. I think we need to make sure that the learning environment's not distractive. And if it's not, then we're not going to make issues of the things that aren't issues.
I'd like to add on that. Some of the things that now this takes away the need for teachers to enforce so much stuff. And so then they focus on teaching. There's less of them focusing on that power struggle with the kids, sending them up to the office, and then the outfit changes on the way to the office. And so then the administrator and everyone has that interaction. So this hopefully takes that power struggle or that problem out of the teacher's hands, and puts it in more of the administrator's hands.
I agree. It should be less work for everybody as far as the enforcement.
Well, and I guess-
Also, something to take into consideration is when you do ask us to go back and revisit this, is there a particular group that feels like they're being targeted and told what to wear and what not to wear? And that's something we took into consideration too, where when you talk about that part in the dress code, we know that the male students are not going to come in like that. So it kind of feels like, are a lot of dress code policies created to restrict what females can wear. And one of the things that in the creation of the dress code, we felt like a lot of the changes were being made for male students. The hats, the headbands, just the overall wear. So, I mean, if there's something that you want to change, well, we don't mind taking it back and tabling it. But as Caleb stated, Tyler and Joey, this was just a culmination of everybody's feedback.
I feel like if it wasn't enforceable, it's supposed to let us know. We've got building administration, Santa Fe, Chisholm, high school, Opportunity Academy, building leadership teams are part of it. We have student council part of it. If this wasn't enforceable, I mean, I have faith with these folks that they would let us know that it's not going to work. But they're all in unison saying this is what's best for our staff and our kids. So I'm backing them 100%.
So I do want to say that I want to be sensitive to some specific dress code items that could be viewed as targeting a certain race or something like that. I think if we do have specifics that maybe those specific things need to be looked at. I think there's probably some middle ground here to where if we have specific issues, yes, we need to look at those and figure out a different way to approach that. But I don't know that that necessarily means taking almost all of the guidelines away to address a few, hopefully a few issues. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to, and I don't know, you would have obviously been in education at this time, with Columbine. I know that changed a lot of things as far as visibility of faces, visibility of students. So it is, some things are strictly for security and safety, which is one of our very top things for our kids. And so while there are certain preferences, I completely understand that. At the end of the day, we have to protect our kids, make the safest environment for them, and an educational environment to where there will be as few distractions as possible. There will always be distractions all the time. You can't rule that out. But I want to make sure that we're not making some compromises when it comes to safety, especially. We put so much into cameras covering every inch of our buildings, which unfortunately is necessary at this time. So I think we need to stay visible and make sure that we're doing everything we can.
So then on the visibility and safety, is that just crossing off the hooded sweatshirts?
Let me go back, like I said, I'm having issues with my.
We have to give them some feedback so they can come up with
Well,
something
and
that
I
will
think that
approve.
they were asked to originally approve the Chisholm student handbook.
And then you want consistency.
We said we should have consistency throughout those schools. So completely rewriting it is not what I had in mind. I think the current policy at Chisholm is a good basis. And then if that needs to be tweaked for some of these things that you were just referring to, add that in.
Even though the Chisholm one is punitive and mainly punishes women and people of color. That's the one that you,
Can you give your specifics on that?
Joey just was saying.
Well, you're bringing it up, so can you give your specifics on how you do that specifically?
I don't see it that way, and I can speak specifically to it because we were in a situation and other parents that I know with long arm, long legged girls with the fingertip rule, that was not a good thing. So I think the way that it's written as far as shorts concerning rules, I'm okay with. And that's a visual thing. That, I mean, you don't have to measure the NC, but that's a visual thing.
To me, there's a real bottom line issue. We've got multiple buildings worth of dress codes created by professionals with experience in doing so, who are educated to do so, whose job and training qualifies them to do so. They have put heads together at multiple levels and done exactly what we hired them to do. And we're telling them that the job that they're trained and educated to do, they've done incorrectly.
I
I don't
don't see
think
it
that's
that way.
appropriate.
I don't see it that way.
I think that's way overstepping. I'm in the same place I was at the last meeting.
Okay.
But even looking at the,
But what I really want to know is this change anybody's vote? Because if not, I need to know.
But if not, do you guys have what you need to come up with a policy that will approve?
I don't, not exactly, but do you mind, Eli would like to say a few things.
Sure. Thank you.
Hello. So when this originally started with the Students for Racial Justice Club, that started my freshman year. They had decided that this was something they wanted to look at. Honestly, if you ask any student from basically 5th grade to high school, the biggest complaint they've always had has been dress code about the school overall in every way. We had at one point in time at the high school a protest of students wearing bandanas because they really didn't like the rules of what was going on at the time with the dress code. And at my sophomore year, we had the saying in student council, the best way to get elected is say you're going to change the dress code. That was just the way that we were working at student council at first. So when Students for Racial Justice brought this to us, at first there were glaring problems. There was crude language. There was the phrase no restriction on cleavage, which we had to throw that out immediately. So there were a lot of different issues that we had seen with the original dress code that was brought to us. But we see this one that's proposed as a way for students to get a say in this and have a way to change what they've been having going on in their high school career, which just felt like just the administration cracking down on them the whole time. When the first original dress code was written, times have definitely changed from then. I can agree with what Mr. Smith had said. Not only are there times where teachers interacting with students and dress coding them is what they'd say. Not only is that making the student say, oh, I don't like this teacher, and now that's the only interpretation they'll have over the whole year. I have friends who say, oh, this teacher doesn't like me anymore. And that's the whole thing that they're having going on. So this would help build relationships, not only with teachers and administration, it also show that students do definitely have a voice in what goes on in their handbook and their school policy. And it also helps to express a few glaring issues that we've seen in saying face coverings as well, as you brought up earlier. The dress code currently, I don't believe it allows face covering. I think that's one thing that has in the proposed one that says no face covering is allowed. Students for Racial Justice Club wanted to add it in, except for in religious headwear reasoning. And any other forms like that, they've been making sure they've flawed it out as best they could to remove any discrimination they could possibly have in this and make it as broad as possible so it's available to everyone from 5th grade to being seniors. So thank you.
and I do have to say, just to piggyback on that, I do like the piece where, like I mentioned, nothing that obscures your face except for a religious observance. And I've seen in other districts where they will say, maybe not just on this specific item, but without prior approval, which does open it up to where if you do have individuals who have specific needs or specific issues, that absolutely get some approval, that's fine, because there will be times of those situations, and I don't want to have something that is so restrictive that we do get into those areas, because that's not okay. But that doesn't always necessarily mean completely take it out either.
Okay, the next item is the final report on COVID-19.
Yes, and I have these. Sorry, now I have to pull it up. It's sooner than I thought. Brief PowerPoint to share, and Is she on? She can't get on? Oh, you know what? I'll let that be my fault. I included you. Did you check on the invite? She didn't text me. I'm checking my messages. Yep, she's here. Sorry, Sheila. We had technical difficulty. Actually, I just forgot to click you in. So Matt's going to find you. Can you get her on? She will provide the board with some information as it relates to how we ended the school year. And what I'm going to share with you is our debriefing that we conducted last week. And you need this if you want her over this, if I want her over the speaker. But then how will I show it up there?
Yeah, you can.
She'll have to talk loud. Sorry. Oh, wait, I need to mute myself. Sorry. Sorry. She's not singing, but, oh, and then I hang up on her. Oh my gosh. You know what? We think that we have this down pat. Okay, I have muted my mic. You're too close. There we go. All right. Okay. Okay. Back to here. No, I don't. We were so excited to be in person that we're getting all that we learned in 8 weeks. Without a fun.
Will they arrest us if we do new business while we wait?
If we what?
Do new business while we wait?
It won't take us but a second. We hope. Can you hear me now? Oh, I'm muted, that's why she can't hear me. You can mute yourself. I don't know what's in the business now, but I can't see what.
Gift request. Gift request.
Oh, you could do gift request.
Let's go ahead, is everybody okay with that? To skip ahead? Okay, we'll go ahead with gift request.
Always. It's the worst part of this job.
Thank you, Martina.
I always so much pressure to make sure you pronounce people's names correctly.
I agree.
And I don't want to offend anyone by, it is a hard one.
I know, Pamela, it's not hard to say at all.
So no motion, these are all under the limit, but we would like to extend a thank you to Pamela Proshesky.
I like it.
I'm going with that. I apologize if I butchered your name. To a gift to Walton Rural Life Center for resources and supplies for $20. And also thank Norman and Barbara Brooks for their gift to Walton Rural Life Center for resources and supplies in the value of $50.
Now we'll go back to the.
Now we'll go back to COVID-19. Okay, Sheila, can you hear? No. All right, we'll try to figure that part out. I'm gonna do this part first, and then we'll figure out how to get Sheila in. Sheila is, by the way, on vacation, which is why she is not here this evening. They are in Cooler, Colorado. Lucky them, unfortunate for us. First of all, I just wanted to explain what our questions were when we debriefed. So we got to the end of where we were at, and we were reviewing our objectives and the areas of emphasis, and that included a team of all of the ICS folks and all of the directors that would have had a key part in that. And our emergency management, Gary Denny and Brian Ellis, as well as Lynette Reddington from the health department. And so they have been very instrumental, those three folks, in helping us throughout this process whenever we've had a question about what we needed to consider. So we wanted to particularly address these questions. What did we do well? What might we have done differently? Were there other objectives that might have been beneficial? And were there areas of emphasis that needed attention? In other words, did we hit everything that we needed to hit? Just as a reminder, these were our 4 objectives: to reduce exposure and the spread of COVID-19. And we felt like we had definitely met that objective, as we had no members of our staff and no members of our students that were working in schools. So that would be Mike McConnell's kids, as well as others that came in contact with our buildings during this time that contracted COVID. To meet the educational needs, of course, that was a bit of a challenge given the circumstances, but we feel like we did, and we're very fortunate in being able to do as much as we could to help parents and students in continuing their education and staying engaged and having our staff be engaged with them. And then collaborating with the community on resources. Again, we reached out to our community partners, and about the only thing that we basically did for the community was we had some masks on hand that we did provide to Emergency Management Center for use in our community. And then food distribution and daycare. Again, we handled that throughout the pandemic. Food distribution got underway very quickly. Lots of different little changes as we went along to try to streamline and best meet the needs of parents and families, as well as making sure that we were following the guidelines that we needed to follow for the program. And then for daycare, once we finally got to having everything worked out, the difficulty there for us was that we didn't have enough kids then to be able to be able to. So many parents were not going to work because that was during the stay-at-home order. So once that was lifted, we began to again re-engage with our families to get that underway. Those were our 4 objectives. And our areas of emphasis, again, were to continually monitor our plan, develop a plan for childcare. Communication was a big part of that, and how we could quickly and accurately communicate with the staff and students and families. Have a plan to assist staff and students in using the technology. And again, there were a number of people that were instrumental in doing that work. Megan Nagel and Brenda Thompson and her entire team of technicians. Developing a plan to address the learning of students. Again, that was Sheila and our professional learning council, our district mentor teachers worked very hard at doing that, and then monitored that every week, sometimes multiple times during the week. Developing a plan to support the social emotional needs of our students. Big shout out to Heather Fisher. She picked that up and checked in regularly with the social workers who were checking in regularly with parents that had been identified as families that might need some assistance. And then developing a plan to end the 2019-20 school year, which meant how do we manage a variety of things, not the least of which was getting all of the resources returned to the district that had been checked out. For the question, what did we do well? Our group felt that our facility staff worked very hard and efficiently. They kept things clean and did a lot of organizational work to make sure that we had people available to clean behind staff members or students that were in the schools. And make sure that when we were doing everything we could to control any germs or viruses that might be present. The technology staff, again, big shout out to them, meeting the needs of students and staff, answering a variety of questions about the technology, helping parents to understand how to log into different things, a variety of questions that were answered there. Food service staff was incredible. They have changed multiple times, most recently taken on some additional food that became available so that we provided that to our families. And we have had to rent a refrigerator truck because we don't have enough space for everything at this point. So Elaine took care of that and got that all taken care of. Felt like communication was abundant. Some parents were saying, we're getting a lot of communication, but they were very thankful and appreciative for all that was coming, all the information that was coming from them. Departments worked well together. People really stepped up and did everything they could to make things run smoothly whenever we had a glitch or a question. Teachers worked with students and families to keep education happening, and teachers were willing to step up and do what needed to be done to get the job done. I had teachers that contacted me, and I know they contacted their administrators and each other and Sheila during spring break. What are we doing? What are we doing? I'm already thinking about this, this, and this. And so they were working even ahead of the district at that point. Many staff members increased their own technology skills. Several people reached out and said, thank you so much for making Nagel's assistance and helping me do this. This is not something I'm necessarily comfortable with. A couple of, one music teacher in particular said, this is not something I do in my classroom every day, but I'm sure thankful for the help. The ICS process worked well in our district. It was really the first time that we had used this on a grand scale. You might recall a couple of years ago when we were worried that we were going to have to shutter the schools for the summer, when the legislature had made decisions about funding. We went through that process, but it was a very limited group. The ICS process at this point really touched a lot of people. We also had undergone a refresher course with Gary Denny and Brian Ellis over the last in-service day, or the last professional learning day in February. And they felt like that was very beneficial to having this process work well. What might we have done differently? We felt like we could have increased the communication from the incident command team to the principals and other groups. Thinking about the operational briefings that you all received also, we could have forwarded those to the principals and that kind of thing. So they would have had more detail about what was being talked about and conversed about on that level. Schedule messages more. Felt like, we were just so trying to respond in the moment that a lot of times we were sending out multiple things, and maybe there would have been an opportunity to streamline that a little bit more. Increase our spending flexibility earlier. In that, it just means we had already set some limits, some budget limits in different departments that needed some additional flexibility, possibly. So that was an idea that was brought up. How might we do that in an emergency environment? And then more cross trainings so that more of the staff know and understand their roles in an incident command system. What about objectives that might have been beneficial? The only one that we really thought of was an objective specifically for mental health of employees. We had a couple of employees that struggled a bit. We were able to handle that through personal conversations with those folks, but maybe they would have felt like there was more support if there was a specific objective for that. I know that Jane sent out information regarding impact several times so that our staff was aware that there were outside resources that were available to them as well. Don't know that any of us maybe realized very soon how much stress we were all under at that particular time. And then areas of emphasis, we could not come up with an area of emphasis that we didn't feel like we had covered in the ones A through G that were listed previously, that we thought would be beneficial. So what do we need to be thinking about? Well, when we were listening to Gary Denny and Brian Ellis, as well as Lynette Reddington, one of the things that they said was, of course, be prepared for changes. So anything that you're setting in stone now, you have to understand that that could change at a moment's notice. And I think we recognize that when we all go to spring break expecting we're going to be off for 6 days, 6 school days, and then nobody comes back to school after that. So I think that we do understand how quickly things can change. They also said in relation to the opening of schools, have a plan A, B, and C. And I think that that is something that as you move forward in the next month, there needs to be some dialogue about that. I know that the Kansas State Department of Education will be coming out with their framework in July 10th. And so that will be a part of the conversation that you have moving forward about what does safety look like. And I'm beginning to see a lot of different things that different superintendents are doing across the state. Got an email from someone today wanting to know if we had sent out a survey about how do parents feel about their kids coming back to school. Do they want them to come back to school? I've had a parent that has contacted me about not having their child attend school next year and wants to be able to do that at home. And then what does that mean? Because they want the child then to be ready to go into the next grade the year after. So I think there are going to be a number of things that the board and the superintendent are going to be processing over the next several weeks. And then consider the CDC recommendations. We did look at the CDC recommendations as an administrative staff along with, and that was all of the building administrators and district office support, and our nursing staff. And there are several things that we know that we would not be able to do in our district and still have school. It would be very, very difficult. An example of that would be, we did an overlay of a classroom, and if you were to retain 6-foot distance between all of the student desks in an 800 to 900 foot classroom, you could only put 16 desks in that classroom. Well, we have class sizes that exceed 20. So that would mean some different things. So you could split the class and have some kids come 3 days a week and some kids come 2 for 2 weeks and then for 1 week and then you flip it the next week. That's not going to be real convenient for parents and for families. Not to mention if you had kids in 4 different schools, which is highly possible in your district, and 5 would not be, would probably be more the exception than the rule, but 5 would even be possible in our district. So if you think about that, you would have to make sure that siblings had the same schedule across 5 different schools. Very difficult. So what we have determined are things that we can do and need to be prepared for. At this point would be things like making sure that we have enough disinfectant and hand sanitizers for every classroom, for example. Gloves and masks available for PPE for our nursing staff, our custodians, administrative assistants, folks that are going to have close contact with a child that's potentially ill. Separating a well area and a sick area in our health rooms is presenting a bit of a challenge in a couple of buildings. For example, Walton doesn't really have space for that, so trying to figure out an alternative there. We are looking at things like some kind of barrier, so maybe a shower curtain, clear shower curtain, something that could be a barrier between two children. So some of those kinds of things, again, the nurse and Chris Schaefer, Karen Lehman, and who's our head nurse, and Chris Schaefer are working on that. And then we are also looking at building our own plexiglass structures for the front desks, so that when people come to the front desk, there's a barrier there also between the public and the person sitting behind the desk. So those are the things that we think that we can do in preparation for what we don't know at this point. But those are some common things when you talk about in the dress code face masks or having your face uncovered. That's not possible if the directive comes, you need to wear face masks, or you have children that choose to wear face masks, or you have parents that expect their children to wear masks. So all of those things are pieces that we will be dealing with as we move forward. And I think that is it for me. So now I need to find Sheila again. And there is Sheila. Sheila, can you hear? No, you can't. I'm muted. Okay, Sheila. So we had the question about where we are for participation and how we ended the school year. So I know that you have gathered a lot of information from parents and students and staff, as well as taken a look at attendance and participation rates that have been reported from the schools. So what would you like to share with the board at this point?
So do you just speak specifically with participation or also the survey results?
Just both. I'm sorry, what?
Okay, so I can go ahead and go.
Yes, now you can go. Sorry. Oops, sorry. Yes, he is training me on some things I didn't know. I didn't know that there was a speaker thing there. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if they can see the survey results or not. I'll just go those and kind of give a highlight. We shared the mid-quarter survey, a couple of written schedules, used almost identical questions. We did go ahead and survey, however, we only have 46 respond, so that's not a very high number of the number of students that clicked on.
So that's 46 students that responded?
That were the seniors.
Oh, seniors, okay.
But their institutions were very similar to all of that numbers. So when I looked at other grade levels, 127 that we funded, that was about half of the quarter. In that, though, we asked them the majority of them were saying that they had some down payment. 44% of them said that. And we still had a number of people that were doing nervous cutting and 9% lonely. So I know as you talked about, Deb, of having social workers in that district mental health team, they were reaching out to those students when they had the idea that there might have been some struggles or difficulties.
No. She thinks she lost us. Tell her let her know that
We can still hear you.
Okay, because all of a sudden, look at yourself, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I muted me so that they could hear you because there was feedback.
All right, I'll keep going. And then otherwise, one of the questions that we asked was, how has the school gone for you this quarter? We still had a high number of 85% felt like that it had gone great, whereas 15% felt like it was frustrating. And so I'll get into some of those specifics here again, but very similar to what we were reviewing at mid-quarter. As far as what has been going well and working at home, many of them shared again that they were enjoying talking with at least one teacher, that they had the help they needed to get assignments completed, and that the amount of schoolwork that they had did not stress them, and they enjoyed being able to reconnect with classmates, even though it was online. The struggles, though, were still some of the same ones we saw mid-quarter. Certainly getting a daily routine going, 49% shared that was a struggle. And 39% said that they were not motivated to do their work on their own. And that 34% of them had difficulties in organizing all the information that was sent to them by their teacher or teachers. So here I'll talk a little bit about identified week participation. Started tracking that right around April 13th, and we had 81% across the district that were participating. Each building was working on seeing which students they had some form of connection with, whether it was attending a live session, answering emails, participating in a phone call, might have even been administration or social workers reaching out to the students or their families. So then the next 2 weeks, we had a 95% participation rate across the district. And then the last 2 weeks of school, we were at 93%. So when we think about all 10 buildings and approximately 3,500, 3,600 students, we felt very good about that level of participation. So I know that was one thing that was specifically being asked. Any questions there before I go on to feedback from families and staff? How is participation defined? Is that one interaction per week, for 2 weeks? What was kind of that defining line?
The question is how was participation defined? Was it one interaction? Was it multiple interactions? What does participation mean?
It could have been as the minimum as one for the week to multiple. It would have had a variance. So they wouldn't have had to necessarily done any sort of quote unquote schoolwork to still be counted as participation, correct?
The question is, they wouldn't have had to do schoolwork in order for it to count as participation, is that correct?
Correct, because we had some formally where the student was working 40 hours a week, and so the importance then shifted to social emotional support and how are the conversations going with the student and family, just to make sure that everything was going okay, and working on it that way. And then maybe that student then caught up on what assignments they had for that week into the next. So it looks definitely going back to our two primary words that we focused on, which were grace and flexibility. I just have one more quick one. Did we have any, hopefully not, any students that we did not have any communication with whatsoever? I can answer that, I guess. What was that number like?
The question has to do with, did we have students that we did not have any connection with? And if yes, approximately how many was that? Or if you have the exact number would be good.
As I am looking back at this, I mean, I would say that we've got information there of who they had not been able to reach, but it was a very low number. And so I'd have to spend a little bit of time calculating all that because I've got 10 different spreadsheets to look at here, or Google Sheets to look at by building. But very, very small number as to those that they would have never reached at all in that last quarter.
When I looked at, I can only recall one, but when I looked at one of the schools in the last couple of days.
I'm looking at the high school, just for example, there were only 5 students that they were never able to reach the entire quarter. But again,
I'm sorry. Sheila, I'm sorry, I was talking over you. How many at the high school?
Only 5 that they were never able to contact the entire time. So that's just one example. I'd have to go back and calculate for every building. They wanted it building by building. Because they're on all different sheets, one per building.
I know at one elementary school, they had one student that they could not make contact. Other questions on that part? Okay, go ahead, Sheila.
Okay. All right. Then we were looking at families. We had 838 responded, and that was down quite a bit from mid-quarter. We had 1,246 that had responded, but very similar trend as to what their level of satisfaction was. We asked about amount of schoolwork assigned, and as well as the quantity and the quality. And so very high percentages on those. We did also ask again how we could best support the family, and the same topics came up as what we heard in the mid-quarter, which were 27% wanting to see mental health services, 10% with childcare, 7% with transportation, and 22% responded that there wasn't anything additional that they needed. The last part of the surveys then were from staff, and this one had 249 responses, which was actually up from mid-quarter, which was 216. And this one, when we met with that team that comprised PLC members, mentor teachers, in district and building administration and directors, we looked at separating that out a little bit more by building, and then also the distinction between building administration and district administration, so that we could sort that out a little bit more and really reflect on what the next school year might look like. And so we asked them questions again about teacher collaboration. Again, the numbers were very similar to mid-quarter. We also asked them about quality of communication and broke that down between building and district. The same needs were coming up as far as additional support for the future, and that would have been creating the top one, 43% saying creating meaningful learning experiences, where we also had 35% saying wanting to know how to adjust their content to meet the current needs of the students. So I know that we will keep that in mind as we prepare for the next school year coming up. And then we also asked a question about how staff felt supported by building administration as well as district administration, and the numbers were high on that as well. In fact, if I look at my notes here, up into the 90% as far as how they felt in being supported. So then, as Dr. Ham was talking about, we've already met with the group and reflecting and thinking about steps to take in the next 30 days. And I think she also mentioned already the release of guidance coming from KSTE. When we start looking at the calendar, July 20th, administrators will return. Those that aren't on a 12-month contract on July 20th. And we will welcome back staff on August 7th. So We will have approximately 3.5 weeks from the time we get the information from KSC to be thinking about what does the first day of school look like in all of our buildings.
Any questions?
Are there any questions at this point for Ms. Survey?
It does not look like it's you. So thank you for that, and we will let you go back to enjoying your vacation.
All right, thanks, Deb.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Should we tell her about the strange man that's walking?
I will be sure to mention that to you.
Maybe in Colorado next time, she can be here.
Okay, so now we go to, you're done with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now we'll go down to review of 2020-21 handbooks. This is for new business.
Correct, and these are the ones that you have not yet seen. So these would be brought back to you on June 22nd for your approval and/or feedback, unless you have some tonight that you would like to offer.
Anybody have anything? Okay.
Well, obviously, the Opportunity Academy dress code is the same that we reviewed earlier, so good luck with that.
When we're speaking of dress code, I would like to say for clarification, so it's not to be quoted as something else in a newspaper. When I use the example of face masks, I was not referring to a global pandemic. I don't think we write something specifically around that, but should that situation arise, clearly that would be acceptable.
Yes.
Okay, then the next item is end of year building site council reports.
And again, as per board policy, building site councils are asked to share with the board their report for the year just ending, and those have been provided.
District leadership team reports.
And again, the various departments and Sheila's office provide you with some additional information that maybe is not covered in the board meeting, but is important to understanding what their work is and what they are doing currently.
Right now, executive session for personnel, and how much time do you take?
I'm gonna go with an ever hopeful 5 minutes. That is really good. Okay, 10.
It takes us 5 minutes just to walk.
It's not 10 hours. 10 minutes.
Where are we going?
Oh, they are about to leave.
Oh.
I was gonna say, I think
That's
we
right.
are just missing our audience.
Yes.
Oh.
You can stand in the hallway 6 feet apart. I guess we're gonna have to put little, discs on the floor out there for the jury.
That's all.